It was a cold evening in 1945. The air over Washington was quiet, yet heavy with tension. People walked the streets, carrying on ordinary lives, while inside the Pentagon, every moment was decisive. Some believed the war had ended, but others knew the real battles were still being fought, in secret plans and hidden maps. Colonel Raymond Shaw, now 38, stared out the window of his office, deep in thought. The lights of New York shimmered in the distance, but his gaze was fixed on a single question. Have we truly prepared for everything? Or does the threat we fear still linger at our doorstep? The door opened, and 35-year-old strategic analyst Olivia Green entered. She carried a thick file, labeled in bold letters. Continental Contingency, Phase 0. Raymond asked, calm but serious, "What is this, Olivia?" Olivia replied carefully, "Colonel, this is the map that remained hidden even after the war. It is not just a military plan, it outlines the fate of the continent. And if we overlook its importance, tomorrow will never be safe." Raymond ran his finger along the edge of the file and studied the map beneath. Land, cities, ports, borders, they all seemed ordinary, yet each point hinted at a larger truth. Silence fell. Both understood that this was no mere file, it was a test. And that test had only just begun. October 1940, Washington, D.C., carried an unusually heavy atmosphere. Europe was aflame, yet America stood, seemingly untouched by the fire. 52-year-old President Daniel Harper gazed at the Potomac from the Oval Office window. Across from him, 46-year-old Secretary of War Robert Caldwell sat with a thick stack of files on the table. "We are not yet at war," Harper said softly, "but that does not mean we are safe." Caldwell opened the stack. "Mr. President, the issue is not the enemy, it is geography." This was the time when America was officially neutral, yet behind the scenes, plans were unfolding. Across the Atlantic, the British Empire fought for survival. The northern border through Canada was long, complex, and vulnerable. American planners knew that if circumstances ever shifted, the battlefield would not be in Europe, it would be on their own continent. By 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, everything changed. America entered the war. 24-year-old Lieutenant Marcus Reed stood for the first time in uniform at the New York harbor, eyes wide with both fear and excitement. "Where are we heading, sir?" he asked his commander, 38-year-old Captain Elias Monroe. "Wherever we are needed, son. And remember, in war, friends and enemies both can change." World War II reshaped alliances. Those once seen as potential threats became close allies. But after the war, in 1947, in a quiet room of the Pentagon, 55-year-old General Thomas Bradford stood over a map, alongside 42-year-old naval strategist Henry Collins. Bradford traced his finger along a border line. "This line exists on paper, but in war, it could become the most fragile point." Collins asked, "Do you think we could ever fight on our own continent?" "I believe we must be prepared for every possibility," Bradford said. By 1952, the world had entered the Cold War. 29-year-old analyst Alan Moore was drafting reports at CIA headquarters, maps spread across his desk, Arctic routes, maritime passages, airfields, industrial centers. He asked his colleague, 31-year-old geographer Sarah Linden, if any power steps near, where would the first strike land? Sarah pointed toward the northern ports. "Here. Diplomacy cannot move as fast as action." In 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis shook the world. 34-year-old Major Daniel Cross stood in the Pentagon operations room, listening to radio messages, sweat on his brow. "Are we on the brink of nuclear war?" asked a young officer, 27-year-old Luke Hardy. Daniel took a deep breath. "Every era thinks it is the last, but the real danger lies in the plans that sit silently in files." By 1965, America was embroiled in Vietnam. Yet in the inner rooms of Washington, old maps were still preserved. 60-year-old retired Admiral Jonathan Pierce lectured young officers. "You think alliances last forever? No. Alliances are built on interest. Change the interest, and the relationship changes." A cadet, 22-year-old Michael Donner, asked, "So should we distrust every ally, sir?" Pierce smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Not distrust, preparation. Understand the difference." In 1967, at a secret think tank in New York, 45-year-old Professor Richard Hall briefed policy makers in a closed room. A large map of North America adorned the wall. "History teaches us one thing," he said, "geography never changes. Only relationships do." Silence fell. Outside, the city lights shimmered, but inside, everyone knew the balance of power was shifting like sand. Richard opened the final slide. It contained only one line. "If yesterday's friend becomes today's threat, are we ready?" 50-year-old Senator William Carter said softly, "We must hope that day never comes." Richard replied, "Hope is not a plan, Senator." The door closed. Files returned to cabinets. But the maps remained. Borders remained. Ports, rail lines, airfields, they all stayed in place. And in the quiet of Washington's night, some were still calculating the possibilities, because history's wheel never stops, and the turn of interests is swift. The story continues chronologically, following key figures like Dr. Edward Miller, Colonel Raymond Shaw, Olivia Green, Lisa Carter, Douglas Hart, and others, covering the years 1968–1986, through Vietnam, Cold War crises, Arctic strategies, energy concerns, and shifting alliances, all while maintaining detailed strategic maps, planning sessions, and historical realism. Every event, dialogue, and map discussion remains faithful to the original Urdu story.